Hi, this is Thomas Sheridan, author of Puzzling People, The Labyrinth of the Psychopath. Come and see me at the Big Awakening at the Middleton Arena in Manchester in June 18. I'll be signing copies of my book and I'll be hoping to meet some new friends. So let's meet up and share some truth. This week the royal family, the Saxe-Gotha-Coburg, the House of Saxe-Gotha-Coburg is visiting Ireland. And it's being passed off as some kind of wonderful event with the coming together of the British and Irish people in a sign of friendship. And the usual platitudes are being spewed. They seem to forget that the British and Irish people have no problem. You know, once the royals and the other side of the equation, the grand chessboard, the Republicans, stay out of the equation, the British and Irish people have always gone on fine. But it's being sold in the same way that we were sold the Lisbon vote, that if you're against the royal visit, you're somehow anti-British, lost in the past, and you're a pro-Republican IRA supporter. If you were against the royal visit to Ireland, the Irish media, being the good lackeys that they are, and being the good government propagandists that they are declaring anyone who is against the royal visit or has a problem with the House of Saxe-Gotha-Coburg to be anti-British. They used this tactic also during the Lisbon Treaty second vote, that if you were against the Lisbon Treaty yes vote, or if you were somehow critical of the European Union, you were a racist, an insular racist who was terrified of moving forward. And the Irish media is using the same tactic this week, yet they're behind all the platitudes and pomp and ceremony. Some serious aspects of this visit are being completely and utterly ignored. That being that they really shouldn't be here for numerous reasons. They're unelected, so their mandate to be representatives of the British people is called into question because nobody elected them. You have Prince Philip here parading around, holding children's hands and smiling with people that he wishes to wipe out when he's reincarnated as an airborne virus. This will never be reported in the Irish media. The so-called national TV station RTE has a website that looks like something from Majesty magazine. It's completely nauseating. It's the worst kind of pro-royalist guff you could imagine. It almost makes it look like a religious experience, and in many ways it is, because ultimately we're dealing here with an occult aspect. These people have a very different religion than the rest of us, and has nothing to do with Catholics or Protestants or even Christianity. It's their own strange, bizarre cults that the elites all over the world seem to have aligned themselves with. Now, recently I've been doing a lot of work into the history of republicanism in Ireland. And I've come to the conclusion, in fact, in a recent video I've made on YouTube, I proved that there's a direct line between what's called Irish republicanism and the Bavarian Illuminati that goes right back through the Grand Orient Lodge in Paris. It is a direct line, and we were never taught this in school. We were never taught that the United Irishmen, the founders of the Republican movement in Ireland, were basically a Freemasonic group working for the globalists through the Bavarian Illuminati via the Grand Orient Lodge in Paris. But this is the reality of it. And all through the years, and it's just like how it always has been, whether it's English troops dying in the trenches in Flanders shooting German troops who are probably more ethnically related to the British royal family than the actual English troops were, to good Irish men and women all through history who genuinely thought they were fighting, when they were fighting for Irish republicanism, that they were actually dying to free their country from royalist rule. And in reality, the tragic and appalling nature of this is that they were just pawns in a grand chessboard played between two sides with the same bloodlines pulling the strings. We're not told any of this. The history is there in the books. If you go and dig for it, you can find it. But it's never taught in school. It's never brought up by the media. And so we get a situation this week where almost 100 years to the day, the member of the British monarchy, the Crown, has arrived in Ireland to basically stamp her authority on the country. It won't be sold that way. It won't be marketed that way. But this is what's going on. Now, if you look at the arrival this week, in May, apart from the fact this May seems to be a very, very interesting month at the moment this year. We had the Beltane rituals at the beginning of the month and the various deceptions and other farces that were played out in the media. But also May, for some reason, seems to be very important in Ireland. We have Obama also coming here to claim his ethnic origin as an Irish person, which is, is just a marketing ploy to get the Irish American vote in the next elections. And also to make sure that the US military imperialist war machine remains at Shannon Airport so it can go and kill brown people for oil. But this interesting month, if you look back in Irish history, and it seems to involve events concerning the Crown and the Irish nation. I'll give you some of the things that have happened in May, in the month of May, Beltane, as it's known here in Ireland as well. The month is actually in the Irish language called Beltane. In 1800, this week, the Bill of Union was introduced into the Irish Parliament. Now, the Irish Parliament back in 1800 was really just a puppet parliament. It was called Grattan's Parliament, and it was basically just a foreign embassy running Ireland on behalf of the British Crown. It wasn't a true parliament representing the Irish people. It was representing predominantly landowners and wealthy aristocrats and other mercantile interests. Catholics, for instance, didn't really have a say in it. They didn't really have proper representation. So, so most of the country was not represented by this parliament. But the parliament this week, back in 1800, decided to abolish itself in order to create the Act of Union, which would transfer power from Dublin over to London. So Ireland was truly no longer had any autonomy politically, economically, or otherwise. This was a catastrophe for Ireland, but also was a catastrophe for Dublin, because up until this point, Dublin was actually considered one of the main European cities. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that all the trades and guilds involving crafts like silversmith and glassmaking made Dublin very prosperous up until that point. If you look at all the grand palatial buildings in Dublin, they were all built up until about 1800, and then there was a tremendous decline after that. The reason for this was the Act of Union in 1800 not only abolished the Irish Parliament, but they transferred all the guilds and crafts over to London. So basically the economy had the guts ripped out of it, and there were no Irish crafts and guilds except for some meaningless silversmith guilds and ridiculous things like candle making for churches. So the economy was destroyed overnight, and that happened this week in 1800. The Act of Union also led to the abolition of the Kingdom of Ireland, which had been in existence since about the 12th century, the 1250. The last High King of Ireland was Rory O'Connor. So the kingdom was abolished, and Ireland this week in 1800 ceased to be a country. And this is what's happening again this week when you really look at it. Other interesting things like the Royal Irish Constabulary, the British police force in Ireland, was founded this week in 1836. These were a crown force answering directly to the British Royals, and this is their anniversary as well. There was also other interesting events. In 1917, Sinn Féin leaders, now Sinn Féin itself and the Irish Republican Brotherhood is not what it marketed itself as. It's more of a Republican Freemasonic concept than an actual Irish nationalistic concept. And I'll go into that another time if you want, because it's a very complex history. But it was during this week that a bogus plot was hatched where Roger Casement, who was a Sinn Féin leader, was trying to smuggle arms into Ireland, and he was arrested and he was charged with treason, and he was hanged. Much of the actual the case against him was based on his homosexuality, so that was interesting. And also Oscar Wilde was also an anniversary of his arrest for homosexuality. Charles Stewart Parnell, an interesting individual who has a statue of himself at the end of O'Connell Street in Dublin, a street that's literally lined in Masonic symbolism from one end to the other. In fact, it actually is lined in Masonic symbolism from one end to the other. He has a giant obelisk in Dublin, and he was the chairman of the Irish Parliamentary Party. He was elected the chairman this week as well, and he was subsequently destroyed by the Jesuit movement in Ireland, who claimed that he was having an affair with a married woman. So you can see, like, it's all tied up: the royals, the Jesuits, the Republicans, and they use Ireland as a chessboard, just like it's happening now. I can see these same events unfolding. The IMF have actually offered Ireland more money today because we've been so good at doing what the IMF tells us. This would be the equivalent of a heroin addict being given more heroin. It's really ridiculous, and the media spin is just astounding. And here we are with the Queen and Prince Philip in Ireland, accompanied by David Cameron for some of the visit. Among one of the places she'll visit it's just incredible when you think about it, but it's been put off as some kind of peace and reconciliation between the British and the Irish. She's visiting a place in Dublin called the Garden of Remembrance. Now, the Garden of Remembrance is actually a very beautiful and solemn park in the north side of Dublin, just outside the city centre, actually still in the city centre. And it was built to commemorate the people who died fighting for Irish independence. It has this large pool, and in the pool it has these beautiful mosaics which represent the state Celtic chieftains having been put down and to symbolize the end of all wars and the end of hostilities. And it was a traditional treatment in very early Irish history among the different Gaelic tribes that when hostilities ceased, the armies would throw their weaponry into a river. Now, her visiting this place is extremely loaded with tension. It'd be equivalent to a high-ranking Nazi visiting Auschwitz or Belsen. You're talking about people who gave up their lives, poor working class people, who really just wanted to liberate Ireland, have their own government, and they weren't driven by anything that was anti-British. They were very anti-royalist. In fact, in some of their writings, British troops had letters where they would regret having to kill British troops, who were just as much slaves of the monarchy as they were. But it was it's what had to be done at the time. So this whole park reflects this sort of deep anti-war, unfortunate nature of revolution within its stonework, within its fountains, within its beautiful statues. There's a beautiful moving statue of the Children of Lear at the end of the park that, ironically, it's based on a legend in Irish mythology where an evil stepmother who wants to take a man's property away from them casts a spell upon his children and turns them into swans, and they spend 900 years in exile. And that's 900 years is also about the time that the British royals have been interfering in Irish history. So none of this stuff is a coincidence. It's all very sordid. It's all very occultic, and it's not helping anyone except the power structures in both Ireland, who don't represent the Irish people and haven't since the Lisbon Treaty, when they basically handed over our sovereignty to Brussels. And there's also a crass element of business in it. This is the thing I find most interesting about the royal family, is you take away everything else, the ritual, the inbred issues, the inheritance, the blue blood. They seem to be grubby business people involved in shady and shifty deals. And there was a story in the Irish media last weekend, just coincidence now, which talked about how the original Irish Parliament building, which was abolished by the British Crown in 1800, and has been the headquarters of the Bank of Ireland ever since. The same Bank of Ireland who have helped bankrupt this country. They should be called the Bankrupt of Ireland. The building is right in the centre of Dublin, a Gothic. It's really a palace, actually, which makes sense when you think it's a bank. And this building, the Irish government is now talking about, they want to buy this building. They want to buy this building because they want to turn it into some kind of literary centre. It all sounds very nice until you realise that the deeds of this building and the titles are probably owned by the Queen. And she's over here signing off the deeds. So this building will be sold to the Irish people at a huge profit to the royal family. And this will all be hushed up under the guise of a state visit. So again, it's just a grubby business deal. It's almost like a shifty street trader coming over to a different town to sell their wares, make a quick buck, and then get out. And that's an aspect of the whole notion of monarchy that's often overlooked, is just how greasy and shifty it all is in terms of its business dealings. So we have a situation now where anyone in Ireland who has a problem with this visit is being stigmatised as an IRA supporter who has an instinctual hatred of English people. Nothing could be further from the truth. Half of my family is English. I've not, most Irish people have no problem with the English, except the odd idiot who would be the sort of same Irish version of the BNP types you have in England, but they wouldn't be representative of the majority of the population. The media will milk this for what it's worth, hide the true agenda, and it's just business as usual. In fact, there's a ring of steel around Dublin today that hasn't existed since the time of the War of Independence. We have British Secret Service and police marching alongside the Irish Garda and military forces with machine guns to keep the peasants away from the Saxe-Gotha, the Coburg clan. And it's sordid and repugnant on every level. It's just business as usual for these psychopathic elites. They come, they do their grubby business, and they leave. I want to thank ICANN for giving me this opportunity to speak on this important subject, especially considering the media blackout here in Ireland, and I hope we can talk about this more extensively very soon. I'll see you. All the best. Bye.